So I think it's fair to say that, like the many other Marvel Netflix TV shows, the Punisher series has had its ups and downs over the years. Now it's 2026 and finally Disney Plus has given us some Punisher exclusive content in the form of a one-off special titled One Last Kill. And I think this is very much a case of giving the people what they want. So the first series of Daredevil back in 2015 marked a tonal shift from the MCU movies that were being created at the time, in that this world depicted was more violent and dark, which made it the perfect stomping ground for a character like Frank Castle, whose morals and ethics are similar to a degree to the likes of Matt Murdock and Peter Parker. The glaring difference being, of course, is that Castle will take it all the way and kill the villain. His brand of justice involves offing those who have done the world wrong, and this means he tends not to get along with other superheroes in the Marvel Universe. And so he was introduced in Daredevil Series 2, played by Jon Bernthal, who instantly made the character his own. This is a Punisher who operates on animal instincts, who goes into a wild, blood-hungry frenzy when it is called upon him. And I think that the Daredevil Series 2 series was the only time that this was put into a superpower context. I distinctly remember it being explained to the audience that he has some kind of anomalous adrenal response which just makes him souped up in terms of stamina and muscular prowess, hence the reason why he makes all those growling noises, and hence the reason why he gets oh so creative when dispatching his opponents. I love the interactions that Frank Castle has with Wilson Fisk in Daredevil Series 2. Fisk is one of my all-time favourite characters in the entire Marvel franchise, as portrayed by Vincent D'Onofrio, and the chemistry that he and Jon Bernthal had made me realise that Jon Bernthal is the one to play this character. And so in 2017 we had the Punisher TV series, which only lasted for 2 seasons, but this story leaned a great deal further into ideas of trauma, of loss, of loyalty, of duty, and a staggering depiction of PTSD, which Jon Bernthal leans into full tilt. And so the character of the Punisher, as cemented by this actor, was one that viewers weren't very likely to forget in a hurry. I liked the fact that while there were many instances of extremely creative violence, you also had this fully believable sense of affection portrayed by Bernthal's Frank Castle, particularly towards the character Micro, who he buddies up with in this series. Now, naturally, as is the nature of the beast, the violence in the Punisher stuff is taken further than it is anywhere else, except maybe, of course, the Deadpool movies, and those are very tongue-in-cheek moments of extreme violence that you are ultimately supposed to kind of laugh at. I have no issue with extreme violence when it is appropriate, when it fits into the context of the story being told. However, I had a bit of a criticism of it in certain points of the Punisher's timeline, even in the first series, which I liked a lot, just from the angle that occasionally it got a bit silly. For example, it's either the penultimate or the final episode of that series where he takes on an entire squadron of military combatants, and he's doing things such as severing the heads to throw them across the room, and thus killing other soldiers with a grenade head. And I'm just thinking, why? Do you have time to do that? Surely it's a bit of a mission to just I don't know. And things like that worry me from the angle that the writers kind of book themselves into a corner with this. As soon as it becomes about the novelty of the violence, and this is something that happens in The Boys quite a lot, As soon as it becomes that, it kind of detracts from the integrity of the story itself. So if there is a pivotal moment where Frank Castle is to dispatch a important villain somewhere later down the line, are they going to lean into the emotional content, or are they just going to think to themselves, what is the most bombastic and silly way that he can kill this person? And if they do that, it kind of takes away from the story. So I think a balance definitely needs to be struck there. Punisher Series 2 I didn't care for nearly as much. It was good in parts, and it was kind of the same as Series 1, but without that emotional clout gluing the entire story together. He assumes protective custody of a teenage girl, and that's quite a nice relationship in and of itself, but it doesn't land in the same way his relationship with Micro does in the first series. They bring in a character called John Pilgrim, who in and of himself was a cool villain, and then Frank Castle and John Pilgrim settle up and sort of have a kind of slight buddy thing going on at the end, which is pretty much exactly the same as what happens with Luke Cage and Bushmaster in the Luke Cage series too, and it just kind of felt like there was a bit of a Marvel Netflix formula that was repeating itself over and over. You might be thinking to yourself, if you don't want to see the excessive violence, stop bloody watching The Punisher then. And I see where you're coming from, but to me personally, it was the emotional undercurrents that really made this character distinct as far as I'm concerned. I love his interactions with innocent people and this kind of almost heartbreaking eventuality to it, that no matter how much he leans into the life of a retired civilian, no matter how much he tries to rehabilitate himself, the switch is broken and he will always be battle ready no matter what happens. And so skip to 2025 after a 6-year hiatus, and we get a welcomed return of Frank Castle into the brand new Daredevil series, Daredevil Born Again. And Castle's contribution to this series is a welcomed presence, and I love the fact that in this new Daredevil series they don't faff about with reunions or catch-ups. They go straight into the conversation like these guys had never actually left each other's lives. They did the same thing with Jessica Jones in Daredevil Born Again Season 2. As soon as she interacts with Matt Murdock, it's like they only spoke to each other a week ago, and I think that's really cool. The relationship between Matt Murdock and Frank Castle is just gold dust. The interaction between John Bernthal and Charlie Cox just hits a home run every single time, and they really went hard on this in the final episode of Daredevil Born Again. It was great. I love the fact they're on the same page, but it's that kind of ethical code of letting them live, letting them die that will ultimately always bring them apart. But they're just friends, aren't they? They will always be friends. They will always be brothers to a degree. It's only a shame that they can't go 5 minutes being around each other without really pissing each other off. So now we get to one last kill, and before I get started, I'm just going to say, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen it and you want to see it, then don't watch this. But then go watch it and then come back and watch this so we can all talk about it together in the comments. You don't need to have seen John Bernthal's cameo in Daredevil Born Again to appreciate what's going on here at all. There is no benefit to seeing that whatsoever. I consider this special to be a kind of 45-minute long music video for a hardcore metal band with a little bit of prog, like a mild proggy melodic intro crammed into the front just to space it out a little bit. Frank Castle is at his wit's end. He has taken out the Nucci family, which was the last link to the murder of his own family, which means he's done. He's got nobody left to kill, and that puts him at a loose end where the only friends he has are the demons of his past and the voices of people who he loved and trusted, egging him on in a way that they probably wouldn't do in real life. You got Jason R. Moore reprising his role as Curtis Hoyle, as one of the ghosts in Frank Castle's head, and you even have a cameo from Deborah Ann Wolfe as Karen Page making a ghostly guest appearance later down the line. I'm just a bit disappointed you didn't get Ebon Moss-Bachrach reprising his role as Micro, but I suppose that actor's doing his own thing now. So Little Sicily has descended into chaos due to the power vacuum created when Frank Castle offed the Nucci family. Every gang is out for themselves, and one such thug at the beginning of an episode crosses the line from which there is no coming back. He kills an old man's dog. Boy, are you screwed, mate. But even worse than that, Frank Castle has given up on that Punisher lifestyle. He walks the streets amidst the chaos, paying it no mind. He is tortured by visions of his daughter when he visits the graveyard of his family. He is broken as a soldier and also as a husband and a father. He is living in perpetual darkness with seemingly no way out until he is approached by Madame Nucci, played by Judith Light, is an intense, riveting villain. The way she scolds Frank Castle and vows revenge is projected with so much venom. It's an incredible performance. I love this character and I hope to see her in something one day again. But she has explained that all of the gangs are going to be united to a degree in the cause of killing Frank Castle at the time of 647, the time he murdered the last of her family, and to be fair, they deserved it, but that does not stop her vowing revenge. She's turned the death of Frank Castle into a sporting event for her own personal amusement, and that basically sets up the final 20-minute spectacle of this show. Frank Castle goes back to his apartment and suddenly it is riddled with chaos. All the gangs descend upon the apartment buildings, looting and pillaging, which means he has no choice but to burst from his containment and let loose, whilst on fire. Naturally, this bloodbath begins with the staple juxtapose of classical music, feel-good composition over extreme violence. First lot of villains is hand-to-hand combat. He's taking them out by bashing them and smashing them, and they're given a few hits back, but he's so fired up he barely even seems to notice, and it's at that point he acquires himself a shotgun, and then all hell breaks loose. And at the same time, the gangs are kind of infighting a little bit as well and shooting each other too because they're all at odds. It's kind of like playing a level in Doom. In fact, the entire essence of combat during these scenes is very reminiscent of playing a computer game and is extremely fun to watch. So I guess you could consider the apartment scene as round one, and round two is on the building top in the great outdoors, where Frank Castle has to change gears because he's running out of bullets, and whatever gun he picks up from the floor has only got a finite quantity of ammo within, which means he has to get even more creative and a little bit stealthier as well. After a few minutes of this, he has to make a tactical retreat by jumping off the roof onto a scaffolding, at which point one of the gang members literally picks up an adjacent gang member and throws him off the roof to basically use as a kind of human bomb, but Frank Castle moves out the way, so this poor bloke in the balaclava just face plants, and that's the end of him. And Frank Castle continues to plummet and bounces off two buses. Do you think that's going to stop him? No. And this whole thing is insane and brilliant and just plays to the strength of Punisher. I can't imagine many fans of the Punisher TV series finding an inch wrong with this entire spectacle. It's extremely well choreographed and jolly good fun, and it just continues. Now that he is on the streets of Little Sicily, you see the actual morals of Frank Castle being torn in two. He has to make a choice. He can either go after the head villain, aka Madame Nucci, or he can turn the other way and rescue an innocent father and his daughter from being butchered in a shop. Of course, he chooses the latter. So is Punisher One Last Kill a video game, or is it a music video? It's both. But this bit is more music video-y because as soon as he starts running towards a shop, you get I Will Be Heard by Hatebreed, who is a hardcore metal band fully appropriate to the violent, testosterone-laden conventions of the Punisher TV series. And so he goes into the shop with this tune pumping in the background. Whilst Frank Castle is fighting and growling like an unchained beast, he needs to have a precision tactician head on him as well, because he has to dispatch the people in the shop whilst making sure he doesn't hit any of the innocent civilians that they are using as human shields. And he does an excellent job. But just when you think it's all over, the kind of final boss of the mobs charges in, a big old tattooed beefcake who, to be fair, probably would enjoy himself a bit of Hatebreed. And it seems for a moment like this guy gets the upper hand, and then Frank Castle offs him with a pen, a biro. I think it's a blue biro, and yeah, multiple times spits a bit of blood into his own eye. You see, this is the kind of thing I'm talking about. I can't help thinking there was a more sensible way to kill this guy. It gets to the point where he's only doing it because he wants to. The guy is clearly dispatched and he's not going anywhere, but Frank Castle is just continuing to do it. This is what I mean about booking themselves into a corner with the violence. This is where it becomes less about the story and the integrity of the character and more just how can we make this as gross and violent as possible, and they need to just dial back on that a little bit. But then in those final moments of the shop scene, Frank Castle finds his purpose once again. He, in and of himself, is born again. The small female child girl, and obviously she reminds Castle of his own daughter, and Castle is kind of humbled by this experience. Then he goes forward realizing that this is his duty, that he has no choice but to lean into that warrior aspect of his character, because there is literally nothing else in his psyche that is ever going to work for him. He's tried toeing the line of the civilian and it just didn't work out. He has to embrace it, and he can do that by embracing the aspect of championing the innocent and protecting the innocent with a level of finality that other superheroes just simply will not go. And this is encapsulated perfectly by the final moments of Punisher One Last Kill. My favourite scene in the entire 45-minute spectacle, and not exclusively because he avenges the death of the dog, which was well deserved of course, but also because he comes out in full Punisher garb. He doesn't shave his beard off, he just gets a bit of a haircut to make him look even more badass, and he's got the levers, he's got the combat armor, he's got the skull, and he just looks like the dude. He is the coolest incarnation of the Punisher we have seen in the entire Jon Bernthal timeline since day one, and this is the point where I just didn't want it to end. This was a beginning, and I'm watching this thinking to myself, no, this is where it starts, this is where you gotta carry on. But the fact that it's the ending is what makes it so effective. He avenges the man who lost his dog by taking the hat off the thug who caused the killing, but then also whoosh, and then walking towards him. The final shot, if you've seen it, you know what happens. Punisher One Last Kill. I very much suspect that was not his last kill. I liked this a lot, and it is a fair example of does what it says on the tin. And you know what? I've been anticipating this special ever since it was announced, and when I went on to Disney Plus and saw that it was only 51 minutes long, credits included, which takes out about 5 minutes of that time in Disney programming, I thought to myself, really? That's it? I was rooting for like a 2-hour-long TV movie or something, but then I started watching it and it just made perfect sense. It's a very linear, very focused piece of violent performance art. You get the build-up and then you get the payoff. And in terms of the Punisher, you don't really need anything else. It maximised every single minute of that programming. It was a very efficient form of Punisher-esque storytelling. And I've got to give it maximum props props for that. They really did a good one here. I mean, we do have to keep in mind that this really ultimately serves as a bridge between one thing and the other. It's to explain the transition from the Punisher we had in the TV shows to the Punisher we're going to get in the upcoming movie Spider-Man Brand New Day, which is going to be a very interesting experiment in towing the line between the kind of action you get in the Punisher and the kind of action you get in a family teen friendly Spider-Man movie, and that is going to be very interesting to watch, and I can't wait to see how they pull that off. But I don't want to discount what was created here, and I hope whatever they decide to do with the Punisher going forward thereon after this movie or whatever, I hope it stays in the same spirit of this particular spectacle, because this in and of itself, it was a one-shot deal, and that's what made it so good. But enough of my ramblings. Tell me what you thought of Punisher One Last Kill, and what other stuff do you want to see from Marvel going forward? I have been a waffling chimp, and thank you very much for watching this video. If you want to check me out on social media, then please visit my Blue Sky page at thechosenchimp.bsky.social. You can also check out my Chosen Chimp YouTube channel, where I talk exclusively about the great institution that is Doctor Who. It's a bit different to the Punisher. Anyway, enough from me. I hope you are all doing well. Please do have a good one.